Hi, I'm Carole Carson. I'm the author of Blackbird, and I want to talk today about a term, mother's wound. I don't know if you've heard that term or not. I first read about it reading some of the writing of Bethany Webster. And in it, she describes what a mother's wound is. I'll read this definition because it's the best one I've found. A mother's wound is not a physical wound, but rather a deeply ingrained emotional wound, but it's passed down generation through generation. It's the residue of unexpressed pain, unmet needs, and unresolved trauma that can taint the bond between the mother and the daughter, sometimes between the mother and the son. Whether it stems from neglect, abuse, or simply unfulfilled expectations, the mother's wound can cast a shadow over our lives, shaping our perceptions and influencing our sense of self. Now, I was aware that I had some of the issues described in that definition, but I never had a term for it, mother's wound, until I wrote the book Blackbird. And then in writing Blackbird, I realized that what I was really describing was what this phenomena was. Now, the point of mother's wound isn't to blame our mothers or find fault with them, but it's rather to understand what triggered some of their behavior and also to help us understand so that we don't pass it along to our daughters. And in writing Blackbird, I had the most remarkable experience, which is I somehow managed to heal my mother's wound. I didn't do it intentionally, but it was a wonderful byproduct of writing the book. And I realized I went through 4 steps in doing so. The first thing I did was I acknowledged what I'd gone through. In writing Blackbird, I created a little girl and I gave her all of the experiences that I had gone through as a child. Not exactly historically accurate, but emotionally accurate. And I wept as I told her story. The second step was to allow myself to experience the pain that I had walled off. Sometimes for survival, we have to wall off the pain that we're going through. And I had walled all of that off. So in writing Blackbird, the first 2 things I did, first, I acknowledged what the truth was in my experience. And secondly, I allowed some of that pain to surface and to grieve over what that little girl had to go through. The second big step that I took was that I sought to understand the abuser. I sought to understand my mother. I sought to understand what had triggered the pain in her that would cause her to pass along such pain to me. I think I need to write a book about that as well because she has an incredible story to tell. And once you understand someone, it's possible to forgive them for anything and everything they may have done. And then the third thing I did, which really was surprising, is I recognized the blessings in the experience that I'd gone through. Somehow or other, being raised by a person who was as difficult as my mother was, gave me a will to survive. It gave me stamina. It gave me stubbornness, perseverance. It also made me intent upon achieving what I sought to do in my own life. So those were some of the blessings that I derived from having had this difficult experience as a child. And it was important for me to recognize the blessings as well as the difficulties and the pain. And lastly, the last step I took was to help other people. And once I started talking about it, other people came forward, and I was absolutely amazed at the number of my friends who'd had similar experiences, but had been too ashamed to ever talk about them. They didn't want to speak ill of their mother. They didn't want to admit that they were that little girl who was in such pain as a child. I'll read you one of the women who wrote me. She said, there were 6 children in my family, and my mother hated me. She took everything out on me. I was the 3rd oldest child, a girl, and she had wanted a boy. And there was never anything I could do to say or please her. I was scared to death of her until our last big blowout when I was about 15. She pulled my hair, scratched, hit, screamed, yelled. I moved out at 15 and lived with different friends until I met my husband, and I was 18. I later learned my mother was abused by her mother in the same way, and much to my dismay, I have inadvertently passed on some of the damaged psyche to my children, but I'm determined to break the cycle. So that's really what my writing is about, and that's really what this talk about is we must break the cycle of the mother wound, whether it affects girls or boys. It's necessary to end it. To do that, it's necessary to speak up, allow the pain to surface, acknowledge your blessings, and reach out and help other people. And I hope as part of that, you'll reach out and write to me and tell me what your experience was. I'd love to hear your story. Thank you.